The tragedy of Oprah Winfrey is that the world only hears the voice that has healed millions of people, the voice that has moved an entire nation, the voice that has presidents listen and enemies show respect, without ever seeing the wound lying deep beneath that voice. A wound carried since the age of 9 that no stage, no round of applause, no bank account has ever been powerful enough to erase completely. We remember the woman sitting the front row at Chanel during Paris Fashion Week 2026, 72 years old, radiant in a white trench coat with navy blue trim, smiling confidently in the fashion capital of the world, while the entire hall at Cannes Lions rose to give her a thunderous standing ovation. That is the Oprah the world wants to see, the symbol of victory, of power, of light. But what the world often does not see is the 9-year-old girl in Mississippi abused by her own cousin, the 14-year-old girl who hid her pregnancies until her ankles swelled and her body could no longer conceal it, who gave birth to a baby boy, and before she could even hold him, the child was gone. The woman who stood in church and was asked to say one nice thing about her mother, but could not think of a single memory. The woman who spent 25 years on television, helping millions of people forgive their parents, had a relationship with her own mother that, right up until the day her mother died, was never truly healed. The first self-made female billionaire in African-American history once wore a potato sack to school and was mocked by her classmates. The woman awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by the President of the United States once lay on her bed at 14 and planned to end her own life. The voice has never told the whole story. The question is, how can a human being continue to heal the entire world when her own wound has never fully closed? How does she continue to give others what her own childhood never received? If this story touches you, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like for Oprah. To understand the voice that has healed the world, we must return to the place where that voice was once strangled, long before the stages of millions, before the media empire. Before the night, the entire Cannes Lions Hall stood to honor her. There was only a little girl. Oprah Gail Winfrey was born on January 29, 1954, in Kosciuszko, Atala County, Mississippi, the rural South of America, where racial segregation was still deeply embedded in every street corner. Her mother, Vernita Lee, born May 2, 1935, was a teenager when she gave birth to Oprah, too young and too poor to understand how to raise a child. Her father, Vernon Winfrey, a former serviceman, did not live with Vernita, and the child was sent to be raised by her grandmother, Hattie Mae Lee, on a small farm with no running water, where the little girl had to wear a potato sack to school and was ridiculed by her friends for her ragged appearance. It was on that barren land that Hattie Mae did something that forever changed her granddaughter's destiny. She taught Oprah to read at the age of 3. Took her to Faith United Mississippi Baptist Church to read the Bible before the congregation, awakening a love of language and the ability to speak before crowds. But Hattie Mae was also the one who disciplined with brutal beatings, striking her granddaughter for the slightest reasons and then forcing the child to stay silent. In the book What Happened to You, published in 2021, co-authored with psychiatrist Bruce D. Perry, Oprah wrote that being beaten and then forced into silence turned her into someone who spent her whole life trying to please others, someone who learned very early that the only way to survive was not to resist, not to speak up, not to let anyone see her pain. Silence and smiling became the first survival mechanism of the little girl. The woman who would become the strongest voice on the planet began her life by learning how to stay quiet. In 1960, Vernita brought Oprah to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where she was working as a maid for white families. But the reunion did not bring the warmth the child longed for. Vernita was gone from morning until night, with no time, no energy, no tools to protect her daughter in a poor, dangerous neighborhood. Oprah later wrote that the greatest feeling she carried throughout her childhood was absolute loneliness, the feeling of a child existing in the same apartment as her mother, yet completely invisible. And it was in the emptiness left by Vernita's absence that the worst thing happened. In 1963, when Oprah had just turned 9, she was sexually abused for the first time by her 19-year-old cousin right inside the house that was supposed to be the safest place. In the years that followed, she continued to be abused by multiple relatives and family friends, including an uncle and a close family friend, from the age of 9 to 14. Oprah could not tell Vernita because her mother was not someone capable of listening or creating a safe space for her daughter to speak. No teacher asked. No neighbor noticed. The little girl carried a secret larger than her small body, and that forced silence would become the fuel for everything she built later, when she transformed the pain of not being heard into a lifelong mission. Because she could not speak with words, Oprah spoke through actions, skipping school, stealing her mother's money, running away from home. That was not delinquency, but the only cry for help a traumatized child knew how to make. Vernita could not control her and sent Oprah to live with her father Vernon in Nashville. In 1968, at only 14, Oprah discovered she was pregnant, the direct result of years of abuse, with no one to protect her, no one to teach her that her body belonged to her. She wrote in the February 2007 issue of O magazine that she had hidden the pregnancy for 7 months in utter shame, living in fear of being expelled from East Nashville High School, until her ankles swelled and she could no longer hide it. On the same day she confessed to her father, she went into labor. The premature baby boy was born in February 1968, too small, too weak, and died after only a few days without ever leaving the hospital, without ever being held by his mother. She admitted that she did not even feel a connection to the child, because she herself was still only a child, too young to understand what was happening. In 2017, on the Hollywood Reporters Awards Chatter podcast, Oprah admitted that in that darkest period she had wanted to end her own life, that she saw no other way out except to disappear from the world. The moment humanity nearly lost Oprah Winfrey before anyone ever knew that name. But Vernon Winfrey spoke words to his daughter that forever changed the trajectory of her life. When the baby boy died, Vernon looked straight into the eyes of his 14-year-old daughter and said, "This is your second chance. This is the moment for you to seize this opportunity and make something of your life." He imposed iron discipline: read 1 book a week and write a report, maintain excellent grades, come home on time, believe that she deserved a different future. And it was in that house in Nashville that Oprah found the refuge life had owed her for so long. In the Nashville Public Library, the 14-year-old girl, full of wounds, found the order that real life did not have, found the voices of Maya Angelou and Toni Morrison, black women who dared to write the truths society wanted them to swallow, found the language to name things she had never known how to express. Reading became the first conversation no one could take away, no one could violate. And from the little girl reading alone in the Nashville Public Library, from the child the world nearly never knew, she would become the most famous voice the entire planet wanted to hear. In 1971, while still a high school student in Nashville, Oprah won the Miss Fire Prevention contest and caught the attention of local radio station WVOL, where she began reading the news part-time at just 17. The first time in her life that the little girl who had been forced into silence after every beating had a microphone in front of her. The first time the voice no one had bothered to listen to throughout her childhood was broadcast to thousands of people over the radio waves. In 1973, at only 19 and still a student at Tennessee State University, Oprah was hired by WTVF-TV in Nashville as co-anchor of the evening news, becoming the first and youngest African-American female news anchor in the station's history. Only a few years earlier, she had been hiding a pregnancy in shame and planning to disappear from the world. Now she sat in front of the camera reading the news to the entire city. In 1976, Oprah moved to Baltimore, Maryland, co-anchoring the evening news at WJZ-TV. And it was in this city that 2 of the most important things happened. The first, she realized she was not suited to hard news. She cried when reporting tragedies, asked questions that were not in the script, wanted to talk to people rather than just read the news to them. That lack of professionalism caused the station to reassign her to host the morning talk show, People Are Talking, in 1978 as a form of demotion. But it was there, in front of the cameras of a show no one respected, that Oprah first found a true stage, where she could ask, listen, react genuinely, and be herself. The second thing that happened in Baltimore was even more important than her career. One snowy night in 1976, Oprah invited her young colleague Gayle King to stay overnight because the roads home were too dangerous. The 2 stayed up all night talking and sharing everything. then woke up the next morning with a friendship that would last nearly 50 years without ever breaking. For anyone else, it was just a night of sheltering from bad weather. But for Oprah, who had never had a safe relationship with any woman, her grandmother who beat her mother who abandoned her sister who later sold her secrets to the tabloids, Gail was the first time she experienced unconditional female friendship, the first time she spoke and someone truly listened without using it against her. In January 1984, WLS-TV in Chicago invited Oprah to host the morning talk show AM Chicago, a program that was failing miserably, ranked last in the ratings, crushed for years by The Phil Donahue Show. Phil Donahue was then the absolute king of American daytime talk shows, having hosted since 1967 when Oprah was only 13, the symbol of experience and television power. No one believed a 30-year-old black woman from Baltimore could threaten Donahue's empire right in his hometown of Chicago. But within just 1 month, AM Chicago surpassed Donahue in viewership. The secret was not sophisticated interview technique or expensive production strategy, but an authenticity never before seen on American television. Oprah sat beside her guests, touched their hands, cried with them, laughed with them, creating a space where millions of viewers felt as if they were sitting in a living room, talking with a close friend who understood every pain because she herself had carried those same pains. Oprah was not trained by any school to become a talk show host. She was trained by life, by a childhood full of trauma, by years of forced silence. In every interview, she did not merely ask, but listened with the absolute attention of someone who knew in her bones what it felt like when no one listened to her, and that ability to listen was a weapon no journalism school could teach because it did not come from skill but from the wound. On September 8, 1986, the show was renamed The Oprah Winfrey Show and went into national syndication through King World Productions to more than 120 television stations across the United States. The stage was ready for the moment that would forever change both her life and the history of American television. To understand the weight of what Oprah did on November 10, 1986, one must understand what America in 1986 was like as territory for the subject of child sexual abuse. It was a land of near-total silence. Victims did not speak for fear of stigma. Families did not speak for fear of shame. The media did not speak for fear of losing viewers. And society as a whole operated on an unspoken agreement that some secrets were best buried deep in the darkness. There was no public language for this pain. There was no model for a famous person standing before the camera admitting to being a victim. And there was especially no precedent for a black woman speaking about her own sexual trauma on national television before millions of viewers. That was the most hostile territory imaginable, where every unwritten rule of the entertainment industry, of American culture, of racism and sexism all said that remaining silent was the only choice if one wanted to survive in the business. Oprah did not remain silent. In the episode that aired on November 10, 1986, only 2 months after the Oprah Winfrey Show began national syndication, in the middle of a discussion about child sexual abuse with guests who were victims trembling as they told their stories, Oprah looked straight into the camera and said that she was one of them too, that she had been sexually abused for the first time at the age of 9 by a relative in her own family, that the pain had followed her for decades. The studio fell silent. America fell silent. Millions of people sitting in front of their televisions in their living rooms stopped breathing, because what they had just witnessed was not an interview technique or a television stunt to boost ratings, but a human being tearing open her final layer of protection before the eyes of an entire nation. Oprah did not share to shock. She shared because she saw the guests sitting in front of her trembling in shame, and she knew exactly how that felt. She knew exactly the weight of that secret, and she understood that if she, the most powerful woman in the room, did not dare to speak first, then how could she ask anyone else to open their mouths? The voice that had been strangled throughout her childhood in the house in Milwaukee now rang out on national airwaves into millions of living rooms across America. And that moment forever changed the national conversation about child sexual abuse. America did not turn its back. Instead of being stigmatized, Oprah received hundreds of thousands of letters from viewers, many of them from victims writing out their secrets for the first time, because for the first time they had seen a woman speak first on television and not be destroyed by the world. Oprah had stepped into the most hostile territory and turned it into a safe space. She did not merely conquer stigma, she completely changed the rules of the game. From that day forward, silence was no longer the default choice, and her voice did not stop at healing emotions, it changed the law. In 1991, Oprah personally testified before the United States Senate Judiciary Committee to advocate for a child protection bill, and on December 20, 1993, President Bill Clinton signed into law the National Child Protection Act, a federal statute requiring the establishment of a national database of child abusers, a law the public called the Oprah Bill. The 9-year-old girl who once could find no one to talk to had now written her voice into the federal legal system of the United States. Over the next 25 seasons, Oprah devoted hundreds of episodes to victims of abuse, domestic violence, and psychological trauma. Each episode was another time she returned to her own wound to open the door for others to walk through. Each time she healed a guest, she simultaneously reopened her own pain. And that paradox, the healer having to bleed in order to heal others, would run through the entire rest of her life. But no stage, no matter how large, could contain the ambition of Oprah Winfrey. She did not merely want to host a show, she wanted to own it. On October 12, 1988, Oprah founded Harpo Productions. Harpo is Oprah spelled backward, becoming one of the first African-American women in history to own her own entertainment production company, taking full control of content, broadcast schedule, advertising contracts, and every creative decision related to the program that bore her name. The little girl whose body had once been controlled by others throughout her childhood now controlled an entire media empire. She no longer merely had a voice, she owned the microphone, owned the studio, owned the story. The Oprah Winfrey Show aired nationally from 1986 to 2011, 25 seasons, 4,561 episodes, more than 100 countries, tens of millions of viewers every day, the highest-rated daytime talk show in the history of American television, giving rise to the phenomenon the media called the Oprah effect. Any book, product, idea, or person she touched turned to gold. But Oprah's impact went far beyond ratings. She changed the way America talked, bringing taboo subjects such as psychological trauma, sexual abuse, domestic violence, racism, and body shame into the living rooms of millions of families, transforming daytime television from a place of cheap entertainment into a national space of healing. Then the first peak brought the first price. In 1989, at the height of her exploding career, her half-brother, Jeffrey Lee, born in 1960, died of complications related to AIDS. Oprah lost a family member in silence. While millions of Americans watched her every day, she could talk to an entire nation every afternoon, but could not save her own brother. And that helplessness was the first reminder that even the strongest voice in the world has limits. But Oprah did not stop. In 1996, she launched Oprah's Book Club, and the little girl who once read alone in the Nashville Public Library now turned all of America into the largest book club in the world. More than 100 titles selected over the years, millions of copies sold, any author she recommended almost guaranteed to become a bestseller, and she used that enormous cultural power to give voice to those pushed to the margins of the mainstream narrative, women, black people, authors the traditional publishing system had forgotten. Then the second peak brought the second price, and this time the price came from her own body. On November 15, 1988, only a few weeks after founding Harpo, Oprah pulled a wagon loaded with 67 pounds of animal fat onto the stage, wearing tight size 10 jeans, and announced to millions of viewers that she had lost 67 pounds on a 4-month liquid diet. All of America regarded it as an inspiring victory. But looking back decades later, Oprah admitted it was the moment she regretted most deeply. She had displayed her body like a trophy before millions of people, turned her physical self into an object for the entire nation to judge. And the woman whose body had been abused from childhood had unwittingly repeated the very same pattern, allowing the outside world to determine the value of her body. She gained the weight back within only a few months, and the weight battle would become the most public, the longest, and the most painful war of her life, lasting decades under cameras that never stopped judging. Then came the third peak, and this time Oprah bet on what she called the greatest legacy of her life. On January 2007, she inaugurated the Oprah Winfrey Leadership Academy for Girls in Henley-on-Klip, Gauteng Province, South Africa, a boarding school for gifted girls from poverty, built with hundreds of millions of dollars of her personal investment. More than 1,000 girls would graduate over the years, the majority going on to university. The woman who chose not to have children of her own had adopted thousands of girls, giving them what her mother Vernita had never given her: safety, education, and the daily words, "I believe in you." Then came the third price, more brutal than any before. In October 2007, only a few months after the opening, the school was rocked by allegations that dormitory matron Tiny Virginia Makopo had physically and sexually abused students. Oprah flew to South Africa, stood before the girls and apologized to each of them, and the pain on her face was not the pain of a businesswoman who had lost her investment, but the pain of a woman who had built this school precisely to protect young girls from what she herself had suffered, and under her own roof, the same thing had happened, the most brutal paradox in a life full of paradoxes for Oprah Winfrey. On November 2013, President Barack Obama awarded Oprah the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the United States, at a White House ceremony witnessed by the entire nation, the highest public glory achievable. Yet while the whole world applauded, the relationship between Oprah and her mother, Vernita, the woman who lived quietly in Milwaukee, far from every spotlight, had still never truly healed, remaining an emptiness that no medal, no standing ovation could ever fill. The most brutal reality in Oprah Winfrey's life has not been the natural aging of her body, but the fact that her body has been weighed, measured, commented on, and publicly judged by the entire world for more than 40 uninterrupted years. No athlete, no star in the history of American entertainment has had their weight tracked under the camera longer or more mercilessly than Oprah. As she once said in an interview with People magazine, "I don't think there's any other celebrity whose weight battle has been exploited as much as mine over all these years." And that battle stretched across decades like a tragic loop with no exit. After the fat wagon moment in November 1988, Oprah regained the weight within only a few months, then tried a new diet, lost weight, gained it back, tried another method, lost weight, then gained it again. In 2015, she invested $43 million to buy a 10% stake in Weight Watchers and became a brand ambassador, lost weight successfully under the cameras, was hailed by the media, then gained the weight back and was mocked by that same media. Every time she lost weight, she appeared on magazine covers as a winner. Every time she gained weight, she appeared on tabloid pages as a failure, and her body never truly belonged to her. It belonged to the public, to the paparazzi, to the internet, to the vicious comments of millions of strangers, painfully similar to the way her body had once been controlled and violated throughout her childhood in Milwaukee. And this is the hidden thread that took Oprah decades to see clearly. Weight was never simply a matter of willpower or dietary discipline. It was the body's deep reaction to trauma. Many psychological studies show that victims of childhood sexual abuse often unconsciously gain weight as a self-protective mechanism. A larger body feels safer, draws less attention, is less likely to be attacked, and Oprah is living proof of that connection. The woman abused from the age of 9 who spent her entire life fighting her own body, without understanding that the body was not the enemy, that it was trying to protect her in the only way it knew. Then in 2021, the battle moved to an entirely new front when the body was no longer merely judged, but began to threaten to strip away the most basic ability to move. In August 2021, Oprah underwent her first knee replacement surgery, then a second in November of the same year, both knees destroyed by decades of carrying excess weight on a skeletal frame never designed to bear that load. After the first surgery, she could not even lift her heel off the bed. And she recounted on The Life You Want in October 2022 that when she asked the doctor, "Is it time yet?" he answered, "It's time if you still want to keep walking." For the first time in her life, the body was no longer merely a battlefield for outside judgment. It had become a prison, locking her inside. And the fear of losing the ability to walk forced Oprah to face the truth she had avoided for decades. In July 2023, After hosting the online seminar, The State of Weight, with medical experts on obesity on the Oprah Daily platform, she began using GLP-1 medications, the injectable class of obesity treatments that includes Ozempic and similar drugs, under a doctor's supervision. She tried stopping the medication after 6 months to see whether she could maintain the weight without medical support, but the weight returned, and she accepted returning to treatment. By December 2025, in an interview with People magazine, she stated outright that her lifelong battle with weight was in fact due to obesity, a word she had avoided for decades out of shame, and that obesity is a medical disease, not a character flaw, not weakness, not a moral failure. In September 2024, she stepped down from the board of directors of WW International, the new name of Weight Watchers, to avoid a conflict of interest between promoting a diet program and using weight loss medication, an unexpected side effect. She stopped drinking alcohol entirely after beginning GLP-1 treatment, as if the body, once freed from constant hunger, also released its other self-soothing needs. It took nearly 70 years for the woman who spent a lifetime helping the world accept itself finally to accept her own body, not through victory, but through the acknowledgement that this is a disease requiring treatment, rather than a war requiring winners and losers. In January 2026, Oprah published the book Enough: Your Health, Your Weight, and What It's Like to Be Free, co-authored with endocrinologist Ania M. Jastroboff of Yale University, and that title, Enough, is the answer to her entire life. Enough shame, enough self-blame, enough of letting the world judge, enough of allowing her body to become a stage for others to comment on. The voice that once healed millions of people has at last turned back to heal itself. The body gradually finds peace, but there are wounds that do not lie on the body, and those wounds have no medication, no book, no doctor that can cure them. Throughout 25 years on television, Oprah Winfrey sat beside thousands of guests, children resenting their parents, mothers regretting having abandoned their children, shattered families trying to piece themselves back together from the rubble. And with a gentle yet firm voice, she guided them along the path of forgiveness, healing, and letting go. Millions of viewers watched those episodes and then went home to call their mothers, write letters to their fathers, speak the words they had held inside for years. Yet the relationship between Oprah and her own birth mother, Vernita Lee, never reached the resolution she helped millions of others achieve. Vernita was not a villain. She was a woman who gave birth while still too young, too poor, raised in rural Mississippi during the extreme era of racial segregation, without education, without emotional tools, without any model of how to be a mother. Oprah understood that with her intellect. She repeated it publicly many times. But understanding with the head and healing with the heart are two entirely different matters. And the wound of the child who once felt invisible inside her own mother's house cannot be erased by any self-help book, any therapy, any brilliant career. In the February 2025 episode of the Oprah podcast, she admitted that her mother never said the words, "I'm proud of you," never created the feeling that Oprah mattered, that Oprah was loved, that Oprah was worthy. And the family, the place that should have been the final fortress of safety, was instead the place where Oprah was wounded again and again. Patricia Lee Lloyd, born in 1959, Oprah's half-sister, flew to Florida and sat in the offices of the National Enquirer, recounting the entire story of Oprah's pregnancy at 14, the secret Oprah had kept hidden for years and intended to reveal only when she was ready, then left with $19,000 in hand. Oprah wrote in O magazine that she lay in bed and cried for 3 days, feeling devastated, betrayed, terrified that people on the street would point at her and scream, "Pregnant at 14, you ruined girl." She described Lloyd as a drug-dependent person with serious psychological instability. Lloyd died in 2003, taking the unhealed relationship with her to the grave. Then in 2010, another shock. Oprah discovered she had a sister named Patricia Amanda Faye Lee, whom Vernita had secretly given birth to and placed for adoption years earlier without ever telling Oprah. Oprah welcomed Patricia, but the existence of this secret sister exposed a bitter truth. Vernita had once given away 2 daughters, Patricia through adoption papers, Oprah through emotional abandonment, and both girls grew up with the same wound, the absence of their mother. On November 22, 2018, Thanksgiving Day, Vernita Lee died at her home in Milwaukee at the age of 83. Oprah wrote on Instagram, "We take comfort in knowing that Mother lived a good life and is now at peace. Polite, proper, carefully measured words. Yet precisely because they were so polite and proper, they said more than any cry could." Vernita's death was not a collapse. It was the quiet ending of a relationship that had never truly begun in any real sense. But the real abyss did not arrive on the day Vernita died. It arrived years later when Oprah finally faced what the death left behind. In the February 2025 podcast episode on healing childhood trauma, Oprah recounted that she was once asked to speak about her mother at church, asked to think of beautiful memories, words of praise for the woman who gave her life, and she stood there, the woman with the strongest voice on the planet, the woman who had spoken millions of words before billions of viewers over 4 decades, and could think of nothing. "Oh my God, I don't have a single memory." Silence returned. Exactly where the story began. The 9-year-old girl in Milwaukee who had no one to talk to was now the 71-year-old woman standing in church, unable to find a single word to say about her mother. And that moment, the moment of silence in the church, is the true abyss of this entire story, deeper than any business failure, deeper than any scandal, because it exposes the ultimate limit. There are wounds that even Oprah Winfrey, the woman who healed millions of mother-child relationships on television, cannot heal in herself. Finally, in that podcast episode, Oprah said she didn't abort me. She did the best she knew how. That is not complete forgiveness. That is the acceptance that some wounds never fully close, but they can stop bleeding if we stop searching for what the person who caused the wound was never capable of giving. In 1986, at the same time the Oprah Winfrey Show began national syndication, Oprah kept noticing a tall, handsome man appearing around Chicago. She wrote in the What I Know For Sure column in O magazine that her first impression of Stedman Graham was tall and handsome, certainly, but too handsome to possibly be interested in me. Then concluded he must be a player, and every producer on the team also warned her not to get involved. Oprah's first reaction to love was suspicion, a clear sign of someone who had been betrayed too many times by too many people who were supposed to love her to be able to believe that anyone truly wanted to be with her for who she was. But Stedman was patient, and love gradually formed and became the most enduring relationship of Oprah's life. In 1992, Stedman proposed. Oprah said yes, then immediately afterward everything changed. "Right after I said yes, I had doubts. I realized I didn't really want marriage. I wanted to be asked. I wanted to know he felt I was worthy, but I didn't want the sacrifice, the compromise, the day-to-day commitment that marriage requires." Oprah did not want marriage. She wanted confirmation. Needed to hear a man say, "You are worthy," because that was what her mother Vernita never said. What the little girl in Milwaukee never received, but lifelong commitment, absolute attachment, forever, with no exit, was something she dared not touch. The two never proceeded to a wedding. Oprah explained that her career was the highest priority, that Stedman held traditional views of husband and wife roles that she could not fit, that both agreed if they married, they would no longer be together, because marriage demands a different way of living in this world. Is this truly the freedom of a woman who knows what she wants? Or the final self-protective mechanism of a person wounded too deeply to believe that absolute attachment will not end in abandonment? That question has no answer, and perhaps even Oprah herself does not know where the line lies between free choice and the wound that shapes the choice. What cannot be denied is that Stedman has stood beside Oprah for more than 40 years by building his own identity. Author of multiple books on identity leadership, international speaker, entrepreneur, even though to the outside world he remains forever only Oprah's man. He said on The Ellen Show in 2019, "I am devoted to her happiness." When 1 + 1 = about 6, Stedman is not a victim. He is a man who chose to love without needing a title, to exist in the shadow of a legend while still preserving his dignity. And that too is a form of courage few people see. Oprah also chose not to have children. She told people in 2019 that the level of responsibility and sacrifice truly required to be a mother was incompatible with her career. And she has no regrets because she fulfilled that calling in her own way through thousands of South African girls. But when that decision is placed in its full context, The woman who lost her son at 14, who grew up with a mother who was never enough, whose body was abused throughout childhood. The boundary between free choice and choice shaped by trauma becomes so fragile that perhaps there is no need to distinguish, only to acknowledge that Oprah's life is the product of both will and circumstance, of both strength and fear. Oprah found a way to love without needing to possess, to exist without needing a template. But time, the opponent no one can defeat, has begun to knock at the door. Time is the opponent no one can defeat, and it changes the way the world perceives even the greatest legends. In August 2024, on NBC's Today Show, Oprah Winfrey, then 70 years old, spoke a sentence that left millions of viewers silent. There is a sense of knowing that there isn't that much time left, and I'm at peace with that. There's a sense of urgency about living well. That was not the lament of someone afraid of death, but the declaration of someone rearranging what truly matters. No longer the female billionaire, building an empire. No longer the symbol of power needing to conquer the next peak, but the 72-year-old woman who has weathered enough storms to understand that the time remaining is not for ambition, but for meaning. And there is a profound quiet dignity in allowing a legend to exist beyond the idealized frozen version of her peak years. Oprah, after losing more than 50 pounds, after 2 knee replacement surgeries, after GLP-1, after 40 years of being weighed and measured by the entire world, now carries a body imperfect by any Hollywood standard, yet finally her own body belonging to her, no longer a stage for outsiders to comment on. The 4-decade war with her body has gradually reached a state of peace, not a victory because there was nothing to win, but a ceasefire, a laying down of arms, finally stopping the fight with herself. And precisely at that moment of peace, the world saw an Oprah few expected. In March 2026, after an 8-year absence, Oprah returned to Paris Fashion Week and sat front row at 4 consecutive shows. Stella McCartney on March 4, then Chloe, then Chanel, wearing a coral blazer, a white trench with navy trim, confidently radiant in the fashion capital of the world where every body is judged by the centimeter. Fans commented on Instagram, "Oprah is living her best life." The woman who once pulled 67 pounds of fat onto the stage in shame disguised as victory now walks through Paris with a smile that needs to prove nothing to anyone. In June 2026, at Cannes Lions, the world's largest international creativity festival, Oprah received the Lionheart Award, honoring individuals who use creativity, influence, and leadership as forces for good. When she stepped onto the stage of the Lumiere Theater at the Palais des Festivals, the packed hall rose in thunderous applause, not for an outstanding performance or a successful advertising campaign, but for an entire life, the entire journey from the little girl in a potato sack in Mississippi to the woman standing on the Cannes stage at 72. Then in July 2026, Oprah announced a decision many did not expect. The Oprah Winfrey Leadership Academy for Girls in South Africa, the school she called the greatest legacy of her life, would end operations in its current form at the end of 2027 and transfer the facilities to the Gauteng Department of Education. In its place, she expanded the scholarship program to reach twice as many girls across South Africa. "The dream was never simply to build a school," she said in the official statement. "It was to invest in the infinite potential of young girls. More than 1,000 girls have graduated. Most have gone on to university, many have built careers of their own. Oprah's living legacy has matured and now stands on its own feet, no longer needing her. And that is both the greatest pride and a quiet form of loss that only those who have nurtured something and then let go can understand." Also in July 2026, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle proposed a second television interview with Oprah to discuss reconciliation with the British royal family. But Oprah declined. Sources close to her said she did not want to become part of their promotional strategy. At 72, Oprah needs no one else's stage. She has owned the microphone her entire life. Now she has the right to choose when to turn it on and when to turn it off. And true power is not the ability to speak before millions, but the ability to say no when millions want to hear her speak. Now, Oprah's rhythm of life is slower, more intimate. The Oprah podcast releases weekly. The book Enough has just been published. OprahDaily.com continues to operate, no longer a daily television program before tens of millions of viewers. Yet the voice is still there, smaller, closer, going straight into the headphones of each individual listener. rather than echoing through living rooms across a nation. From the world's largest stage scaled down to a private conversation, yet the power of that voice has not diminished. It has only changed frequency. Oprah Winfrey is not a fairy tale about the triumph of will, nor a cautionary tale about the price of fame. She is a human being who has lived at extremes most of us never touch. Awarded the nation's highest civilian honor by the President of the United States, and unable to think of a single beautiful memory of her mother, building a school to protect children from what she once endured, and having that same school experience abuse under her own roof, spending a lifetime helping millions of people forgive their parents, and taking nearly 70 years to forgive her own body. Remembering only the glory is whitewashing the story. Remembering only the wounds is an injustice to the legacy she built. Both sides are true, and both are needed to create a complete portrait of this person. Because what Oprah achieved is far greater than collecting awards or accumulating wealth. She permanently changed the emotional atmosphere of an entire nation and the world. Before Oprah, victims of abuse stayed silent out of shame. People with obesity stayed silent out of judgment. Black people stayed silent because they had no stage. And private pain was treated as something to be buried rather than spoken. After Oprah, speaking became the first step of healing. She did not invent psychotherapy. She democratized it. She brought it from expensive clinics into the living rooms of millions of ordinary families through the television screen every afternoon. And that act changed more lives than any hospital could reach. And everything she created originated from the wound. The childhood abuse in Milwaukee, the absence of Vernita, the death of her newborn son, the iron discipline of her father Vernon, and the strength the 14-year-old girl found in the pages of books at the Nashville Library, all combined to create a woman whose sole purpose, running through everything she did, from the talk show to the school to the podcast, was only one thing: not to let anyone have to stay silent alone. Oprah at 72 no longer hosts a daily show, no longer sits before tens of millions of live viewers. Her body has undergone 2 knee surgeries and 40 years of war with itself. Yet every time she speaks, on the podcast, in the book, in a rare interview, the world still listens because that voice has become instinct. It needs no large stage, no studio lights, only the opening of the mouth, and millions lean in. The true legacy of Oprah Winfrey does not lie in a $3 billion fortune, does not lie in the list of Emmy Awards, does not lie in the Presidential Medal of Freedom displayed in a glass case in Montecito. It lies in every person who once sat alone in a room with a heavy secret they dared not tell anyone, turned on the television, heard Oprah say, "That was not your fault," and for the first time in their life believed it. It lies in every girl in Henley-on-Klip, South Africa, who has now graduated from university and is writing her own story. It lies in every person who once read a book because Oprah recommended it, and that book changed the way they see the world. It lies in every conversation in which someone finally dared to speak the truth because they remembered that a woman once spoke first on national airwaves and was not destroyed by the world. Through every glory, every wound, every mistake, every loss, through every year piled upon the body and the soul, that voice is still here. Not as loud as before, not as resonant as the stages of millions. Yet it still speaks the thing the world most needs to hear. You are not alone, you are not at fault, and you deserve to be listened to.